Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of One Vision, the FintechFuse. This is Theo, your host for today's episode. Now, joining us today is Sanjib Kalita, someone who absolutely needs no introduction. I mean, if you don't know Sanjib, you don't belong in fintech. I'm sorry. Just go look him up. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Theo. I'm so excited to be here. It's always so much fun to talk to you.
Oh, it's a lot of fun talking to you. And I'm so glad finally we managed to do this. We
Yes.
managed to be in the same place, the same city at the same time, which doesn't always happen. For those who don't know, Sanjib and I actually live fairly close to each other, but we never get to see each other nor stay in town for that matter. Every time we meet up, it's like somewhere outside of the country, somewhere far away in a different coast. So I think we're making improvement slowly, which
Yes.
is
Yeah.
good. Now, when most people think of you or see you, they often see one of the characters in one of the events, one of the anything that you represent in fintech, which for those of you who are actually watching this on YouTube, you see behind Sanjeep, the wall is really, really full. I was joking that you need a new wall now because you're just getting so busy all the time. I love what you've done for our industry, but I think the one thing I appreciate the most about you is your ability to just make everyone feel so welcome and just
Mm.
warms you just feel so authentic and you just, I don't know, bring life to events. I can't say that I'm a big events fan, but I like where you are always because you just make it fun. Um, but here's something I didn't know. And so recently, because before you started your fintech journey, way before Citi, you were actually at Intel doing something
Yes.
really, really cutting edge. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I used to be a graphics chip designer at Intel, and what happened was like the way I got into that was I was in at school studying electrical engineering, and I went to a presentation by IBM, and they were like talking about like these microchips, and I was like, how the heck do you make something that small? And I couldn't believe it. I was like, that seems impossible to me. And so I went into chip design because I was like, okay, this is sounds impossible. How does it happen? So I was like, let me try to make it happen. And so I studied electrical engineering and VLSI design, and worked at Intel. And when I was there, I joined in the mid 90s. Intel, was really big in microprocessors, and so I worked on like motherboard chipsets. And then at the same time, Intel was looking at graphics chips, because it was a lot of computers were becoming more graphical, and they saw it as like more important part of the architecture. So they decided to start a graphics chip business, and I had an opportunity to be one of the founding engineers of Intel's graphics chip business, and it was basically a joint venture with three companies: Intel, a division of Lockheed Martin called Real 3D that developed multi-million dollar military simulation machines, and then a company called Chips and Technologies that did laptop chips. And basically, what we were trying to do was to get that multi-million dollar simulator technology onto a $25 chip. And it was uh, we worked really hard. It was a lot of fun and a lot of pain. And I got to develop chips that are on hundreds of millions of computers. I actually designed a programming language to test these graphics chips, that Intel used for over 30 years. So it's sort of like that was an interesting learning for me. Like, the sexy part of design was the chip itself. The unsexy part was designing, the testing methodology, which was that language. And the part that lasted the longest was that unsexy part. So like I found that over and over again through my career is like the stuff that seems like throwaway is like the stuff that tends to last a long time.
Wow, I think that is quite an analogy. We often talk about in payments the pipe, right? The infrastructure,
Yeah,
all of those things are important. It's not sexy because you can't really see it, but it's really needed.
yeah,
Because otherwise, without it, you can't survive. And but those things last forever. This is fun. I do wonder though. So I was not in computer chips, but I did chemi. And then afterwards, I did spend a lot of time in IT, building systems. I do often wonder if I had stayed in tech, what would I be doing right now? Do you
yeah,
think about that? Like imagine, right? This is many years ago. You were doing graphics chips, and look at
yeah,
what we need right now for all of these things to tick off. That is an integral part of our daily
yes.
lives. What would you like? Wouldn't you, do you actually ever think at one point, like, wait, if you hadn't moved, if you didn't go to
Yeah.
city, if you didn't do something else, what would you be doing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've actually seen in real life what happens. So like a lot of my colleagues at Intel, like I went back for a friend's wedding maybe about 8, 9 years ago, and so I got to visit my old facility at Intel, and like scarily enough, it was like a lot of people, a lot of the same, most of the same people actually sitting in the same part of
Go there.
there and in fact like it was like the cubicles got smaller. It was a bit like in my mind I'm like I'm so glad I didn't stick around here. But then on the other side, like I have some friends who, for example, because it was graphics chips, they wound up going to NVIDIA, and they're graphics chip designers, or they're chip designers or architects at NVIDIA. So that's obviously not a bad place to be right now, and not a bad stock to have, and stock options to have, and so they've done quite well. It's so like I think for me like the thing is like, and this is like I never make career decisions because of money. And it's always about like what I find, might be intellectually interesting, or what might be fun, and so like, because like a lot of times, like if you try to follow the money, like the money doesn't follow you. And so you I don't know, like I do believe that it's good to, a lot of times like the unexplored tends to be, it can be quite good as well from a monetary perspective.
That's unexplored, the path unexplored. I'm learning life lessons from you, my friend. Um, this is so okay. So if we continue that thread, right, where you were doing really
Yeah,
cutting edge stuff, and then you move to financial services,
yeah,
which is an important payments is important, right? We need to move
yeah.
money. We need to move money securely and efficiently. That's important. Looking at the trajectory of both of these two industries,
Mm,
how it has evolved
yeah.
and how it hasn't really evolved. Did anything catch you by surprise? Like at your vantage point right now, did you say, "Oh yeah, I told you so. This is what I thought it
Yeah.
was going to happen," or "Oh my goodness, what on earth?"
Yeah, I actually I love how you phrased it. Like it moved and it didn't move, right? It's like I from a technology perspective, I think a lot of times it might seem very fast, but I think if you're working on the actual technology, it's actually really slow. As an example, um, 30 something years ago, when I was in university, like I got to work on an electric car project, um, done by General Motors, and we were trying to retrofit a GM minivan with electric motors and electronic components and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. This is, you know, I didn't think that it would take like 30 years for it to like actually happen. Even like a couple of years, when I was a junior, I did research in developing artificial neural networks to classify electrocardiograms, and AI essentially, and it was like there too. I was like, okay, this is some cool technology. This is going to be right around the corner, and it's obviously taken decades. I think that, but the funny thing is that right now everything seems to be moving very fast. But like I said, if you're a technologist, it's a long, slow path that you just have to keep at, and it's sort of what I think is more fast moving is like the applications and the use cases and all that kind of stuff. The more the product side, so that's probably more of the faster moving stuff.
I wonder though, if you had stayed with
Yeah,
the electric car project, maybe we would have flying cars by now. Maybe what they needed was you. They're like, we lost the brain. It's really interesting because if you look at automotive industry, I can't say I'm an expert, but if you watched how the tech has come and go and come and go, we had
yeah,
various cycles of where we
yeah,
could have really advanced the tech.
yeah,
Um, and for various reasons, I think policy is one of those
yeah,
that change the trajectory. Because I do wonder. My daughter actually the other day when I was walking her home from the bus stop, and we're talking about future of work. She's young. She's still young,
yeah,
but I'm trying to start making her think about, hey, life is not just all about YouTube. We
yeah,
need to think about something else. We need to think about things that won't get replaced. And she's like, you say that, but people always also said we would have flying cars and we don't have them. So why would I believe that? Right.
yeah,
And and she's right. In a lot of ways, we tend to be a little bit more overly optimistic in how we see the
yeah,
future sometimes. And then when
yeah,
push comes to shove, like you say, tech does take a while to evolve to the state that you can actually create and produce things at scale.
yeah.
But it's good to dream, I guess, once in a while.
It is, and like I still, you know, I still would love a flying car, and I think it's that desire and that love and that aspiration that like keeps us going and trying doing things that might be irrational.
Hmm.
Like I another very interesting thing was like this was maybe about like 25 years ago. I, when I was at Citibank and I was, just like working on various loyalty programs and things like that. And I met one of my friends who's a VC introduced me to someone he's invested in who was an entrepreneur looking at like location-based, like loyalty programs or location-based marketing back then. And this is like in the early 2000s, before smartphones and things like that. And so he used to walk around with a laptop with one of those cellular modem cards,
Hmm.
stuck into his laptop, um, into one of those PC card slots, and then he would basically he'd look like a crazy guy, like walking around with a laptop, and this is how he would like interact with everyone. And I'm like, okay, this is it's clearly irrational, but like he had a belief that like at one point location and persistent connectivity as well as that computing power would intersect and like yeah, so it's like for me that was like, okay, this guy's crazy, but there's method to his madness.
This brings me so much joy because this was actually one of the things that we were dreaming about when I was when I was in telco. This was back in 2005, I wanted to say around that. So we were trying to think of, I was in innovation, and we are trying to think of what new products we could bring to the
Yeah,
market. LBS
yeah,
was one of them. So
huh,
at that time, we had ability to put the tracking ability in trucks so that we know
mm,
where they are, etc. We can track things. I know people who are listening right now is like, what do you mean? Well, no, back then, this was not a common thing. And then we started thinking about, okay, so if we have that ability and we have the bandwidth, we have the data
Mm,
connectivity
yeah.
good enough that we could theoretically push advertising to people's mobile phone. Depends on where they walk by. Imagine
Mm,
walking like right in front of an ice cream store. Boom, you got like a special offer for, ice cream today. Push right
yeah.
to your phone and you can redeem it. So those were the things that we were thinking about. So your friend was absolutely not crazy. I've also done ones where I was sitting in a car in like parking lots, random parking lots, with the cart stuck to my laptop with an antenna out, going around, not walking around, but in the car driving around trying to test things. So, wow, imagine I had met you at that time, and we were in the
Yes, yeah,
same
yeah.
area. This is
We
fitting.
were, it is funny.
You would have thought I was crazy. So back to back to planet Earth. Um, and when in the very beginning when we first started, I joked that we used to meet everywhere
Yeah,
except here in the backyard. You've been
yeah,
to so many countries, way more than I've
yeah.
been actually. You run events in different places. You have met and worked with teams in different places. What are some of your favorite stories or your most treasured memories or teams you've worked with?
Yeah, no, I've like what I say is that, and this is not directly answering the question, but like I used to think that like when I worked at Citibank, after working there 9 years, I was like, I know payments, and then like I left and I joined a fintech startup, a payment platform building technology, and I was like, I did not know payments, and then we sold our company to Google. And I was like, okay, yeah, and I know payments at this point. Then working at Google a little bit, I was like, okay, I did not know payments. And then I left and worked on Money 2020, and I was like, I didn't know anything. And then like, and then after the US show, I was like, okay, now I know this. I know payments. I know fintech. And then like once we globalized, I was like, I don't know this. And at that point, I was like, I'm not even gonna try to know this because it's like it's an unknowable thing. And I'm like constant like what I loved is how we're working with like cross cultural teams was like a great experience for me. And l- and one of the learnings was the fact that like there's um like for example with Europe when we launched, um I was asked to help write like some opening remarks and like to come up with jokes. And I was like, when I started looking and doing some homework, I was like, okay, I'm not going to find a joke that everybody in Europe is going to understand. Like, so that heterogeneity is very different than like the US market.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate that. And I also remember like Michael Ovitz, who used to run Sequoia, um, and he's Sir Michael, and he's knighted and stuff like that. And like, so my British colleagues were like, oh, what do we call him? And so I met him backstage. I was like, um, Sir blah, Mr. Michael, what do you want me to call me? And he was like, oh, just call me bro, which I love, which I loved. So that was actually like a thing of like, okay, just no matter how high and mighty someone might be, it's like they're just a person. Then that there are some stories that like I remember that there was one time I was um shoved in the back seat of like of a car with four people in the back, and it was like this major regulator, like and she was like, if we get pulled over by the police, don't tell them I'm a regulator. Don't and which I thought was funny too. It's like once again, it's like no matter what that person's place in the world might be, like we're all people, and I think that that does get to a lot of like how I view things, and like so for example with like something like Fintech Meetup, it's like so important that like we have a level playing field where whether you're from a big company or small company, whether you're in whatever function you're at, like, just have having a feel that like there's a place for you, and we're all working on financial services and looking at it from different angles. And I think there's so many different viewpoints, so many valid viewpoints. I think like being able to have like a once again that level playing field is really important, and like just an appreciation that everyone is in fact a human.
Everyone is a human. See, that's why I like talking to you, because you make things feel, looking for the word, so normal
You know,
in a very chaotic world. And you
yeah,
just, it's very peaceful when I talk to you. You're like my therapist after the events, which I appreciate it. I still remember the dinner that we shared in Barbados.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
that was lovely. Or
That
the
was
lunch
fun.
that we shared in the middle of a fire alarm. That was interesting as well. Let's hope next time we do this, there's no incidents. But
Yeah,
so you did set it up nicely for the next thing I wanted to ask you. So
yeah,
FinTech Meetup.
yeah,
You've been involved with the team for a little while now. Uh, and this year, it seems like every year is getting bigger and bigger. It's only been around for a few years, but last year you guys
yeah,
had a huge attendance. And I
yeah,
remember everywhere I went last year, people were like, "Did you go to FinTech Meetup? Oh my God, how come I didn't go? How come you didn't go? Wow, we made deals from FinTech
yeah,
Meetup." I heard people saying literally in the industry, they said, if you want to make relationships and partnerships happen, make sure you show up at FinTech Meetup.
yeah.
It's like you can't get better endorsement than from people from actual FIs that come out and say your show was perfect.
Mm.
So, which brings us to this year, 2025. What are some of the big themes that you have planned for us?
I mean, I'd say that the themes are like probably like five major themes that are on our agenda. The first is about developing products that are sustainable through like however through the chaos. If you will, I'll have to use your word for that, because it is more chaotic than before, and so like how do you develop products that can be fleet of foot but are not over-engineered and cost prohibitive and so forth. So that I think that product piece is really important. Then the partnership piece is also like a big theme. Obviously, as you know, with FinTech Meetup, there's I think a lot of the value is from the meetings and the people that you meet, and like the one-on-one conversations. And so and I think that being able to shine a light on like how some of those conversations might have led to something that might not have happened, I think that that's actually really interesting. Another piece is distribution, because it is so many of the big winners in fintech have done something creative with distribution, or been able to get their hand to the products of consumers and businesses in maybe not non-traditional manners. And so, like, uh, highlighting some of the trade-offs and ways to do distribution is important. The next piece is capital, because obviously we sort of been through the ups and downs, and there's talk about of a lot of dry powder, but at the same time, it's not there's still challenges in getting funding. So so that's one element of it. Then as well as like the M&A activity and potential IPOs, because that there is a backlog of companies, of major companies that uh, could and maybe should access the public markets. And the final piece is about navigating uncertainty, and with all of the four prior things, it's sort of like there's you might have the best laid plans, but like how do you hedge against that? How can you think about things in a different manner, or maybe like shift the perspective to to do well in ways that you might not have thought of before. So that's probably a little bit of a overview of like how I'm looking at the agenda.
Is very practical too. I think a
Yes.
very, very pragmatic look at acknowledging where we are right now
Yeah.
and arming people with the tools and information that they need to move forward as an industry this year.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really amazing. I know that it is going to be in Vegas. I'll be the first one to say I'm not a big fan of Vegas as a location. It's like a
Yeah.
zoo, but I
Yeah.
do look forward to the conversations.
I-
If
and like seriously, so excited to have you there. I'm like so excited that you're going to be there.
I am too. Thank you. Thank you. I keep hearing so many good things about it. So thank you for helping to make that happen for this year. I had it blocked on my calendar. See, now I
Yeah.
told you. I actually blocked it. I'm like, I need to make sure I get there. Um, if you could host an event anywhere in the world, it doesn't have to be FinTech Meetup, just any event
Yeah.
anywhere in the world, where would that be and why? I'm very curious because we've seen, and you in particular, you have been entrenched and embedded. You're in the middle of it for so long. We have seen big shows come and
Mhm.
go. We have seen smaller, more boutique shows in different locations. We've seen faraway shows. We have seen shows in the middle of the city. What do you think what works and what do you think will be the perfect event for our industry?
Yeah. So like I think so like what like as far as location, there's a bit of a trade-off. Um so for example, you can have an event, let's say in like for financial services in New York City or Silicon Valley, and it's like where there is a lot of folks that work on that kind of stuff, so it might be easier for them to get there. But then you also might only have them temporarily because they can go to and from their office, and so that's why, for example, when we were in Barbados, like no one's going back to their office from Barbados. It was like it was a really um a nice environment there, and I I think what like if I then this is very self-serving, but like if I could have any event anywhere or event anywhere in the world, it would probably be like, I'm from the northeastern part of India, a state called Assam. It's traditionally been, I'd say, maybe a bit underdeveloped. And so I think it would be cool to have an event there, just more from a personal perspective of like trying to like having gone from there and to the rest of the world, being able to maybe bring up the rest of the world there, I think would be really cool. Just more from a uh, emotional, maybe once again, this is not rational, but more from a personal perspective, I think.
I think it's actually a great perspective. We often talk about in our industry when we think about products and services and how a lot of that is influenced by our lived experiences, is
Yeah,
influenced by how we raised, it's influenced by the environment that we grew up in. Um, I'll be the first one to say, I love it when people host events in Hong Kong because it brings me joy to see people coming to the place where I've spent, my first half of my life.
yeah,
That's actually not really now that I'm 52. Um, okay, well, the early portion of my life. Oh my goodness. My teenage years. All right, we'll settle
yeah,
on that. Um, and and just to see how the city transitions and see how people can appreciate, right? I'm a huge fan of bringing different perspectives. That's why I love what you were saying, being in different places, working with different teams, thinking that we know something and then having that all completely like busted. I
Yeah.
feel that every time when I go to, Asia, for example, I'll be like, oh, whoa, wait, oh, yeah, this is a smart way of thinking about things. How come we didn't think about
Yeah.
that? So I think there's a lot of value in mixing cultures and mixing
Mm,
perspectives together. So hey, India might be a great thing. It's always been on my list of places to go visit. Why not? Maybe we should make it
maybe
happen the next
maybe we
five
should
years.
make it happen. Yeah.
Right. So before we close, fun
Yeah.
question I want to ask, and we've done this with quite a few folks, and we often find really interesting responses. And this came from kudos to my children because they came home one day with a project of a time capsule, and I'm the guardian of
Yeah.
the time capsule, apparently because I'm like the more organized one. So the question is, if you were to put three things in a time capsule that you can open in 30 years, what would that
Yeah.
be and why?
If for a time capsule, let's see, 30 years, I like the if the three things. So I think the first thing might be a Twinkie. Um, because first of all, I want to see if it's still good to eat after 30 years, if the rumors are true.
I think it might actually be. That would be really scary.
Um, I also think it will be an interest for whoever opens it up. I'm really curious whether when they open it up and they see the Twinkie, will they be like flabbergasted or happy? Like, will they be like, will they say, I can't believe they ate this stuff? Or will they be like, ah, this is awesome? Like, because that's like a temperature read of what society is going to be like in 30 years. So I'll say the Twinkie. Um, and then maybe on the opposite end, I, I, I'd put a bottle of of glacial water, pure glacial water, because, and this is, I maybe a negative thing. Like I do think that I don't have high confidence that we're going to be able to keep our environment clean. And like with microplastics and pollution and everything else like that, like so I actually think that like having something like pure water without any of that yeah, that will be like super valuable in 30 years. So like I think that's I'd put something like that. And then finally, I I'm thinking of like I I would love to have like some kind of a book about like maybe a booklet with like um pictures of different types of people as well as different languages and just to show um like what was here 30 years ago because I also like I think that we're probably a lot of times it's probably more going towards like the median or the mean like as opposed to like the breadth and like even in the US like I think that like the different parts of the country used to have much more individual nuances and accents and things like that but now everything is like is more homogenous and like I see that even with like my family in India or other parts of the world where you go anywhere and you find Domino's pizza or you find a McDonald's I think it is being able to capture that I think would be cool and just as a bit of a signpost of where we are.
Your comment about the glacier water, actually, someone else has suggested something similar. It said clean water,
Mm,
and then someone else
mm,
said clean air.
mm,
Because in
mm,
30 years, it could be very, very different. It did remind me
yeah.
of the movie Silo, where they live
Mm,
underground for so long,
mm,
and they hadn't seen a beach. The only beach they saw is from a book.
yeah.
But I I think it does resonate, and it's the future is going to be. I'm not going to say the future will be perfect. No one can guarantee that, but
Mm,
I think the future will be interesting, and then this year in particular, it will be very interesting to watch. If I might add one last thing, is whatever themes that people are thinking about. For those of you who are listening in, If you work for an FI, if you work for a fintech, if you work in our industry, I hope that in the midst of all these chaos, we won't forget one of the key reasons why we're here is we're here to serve. Financial services is two words, finance
Mm.
and service. So let's not forget the
Yeah,
service part. So for that,
great
thank you
point.
so much for joining me, Sanjib. Appreciate the conversation as always. And I look forward to seeing you at FinTech Meetup very soon.
Thank you so much, Theo. Look forward to seeing you in person.
Thank you. And for the rest of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of One Vision, the FinTech Views. We will talk to you all next week.